Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax. We hope you enjoy this sermon from a recent Sunday worship service.
I want to tell you something. It's almost like a question from the question and answer service, but I've never gotten this question during the question and answer service. So I will pose it and let you know what the answer is all at once. The question is, why don't we post blurbs or short paragraphs about the sermons anymore? That is the question. And here's my answer. Because it doesn't really matter if you don't know the topic. It just matters that you are here. I stopped posting sermon blurbs years ago, and when I came to UUCF, I stopped the practice here. Now, here's the reason behind that reason. Sundays at UUCF are not an academic exercise, although there is learning involved for all of us, hopefully. Worshiping together is not a consumer product for all of us to decide whether we want to pursue it or not. And being a participant in this community is not a solo experience. A significant reason for the existence of this community, whether you are tuning in online or here in person, is to weave a connective tissue of our shared spirituality, of our need for community, and for all of us to foster the connection of our common humanity. This has been another week of brokenness in this country. This has been another week that doesn't just tear at the fabric of our common humanity, but works hard to rip it. One of the reasons for the existence of this community is not just to fulfill our own personal needs, but in service to the greater good, in service to the idea that we can only grow so far in reflection of ourselves. This is something I've always believed, that we grow in reflection to others. We grow in reflection of diversity. We grow in reflection of those who provide a different landscape than the one we see every day outside our own windows. That's why the narrow understandings of what the world is or should be is not only unfortunate, but it can be dangerous. They can stoke the flames of savagery and lean heavily into the worst aspects of our nature. This week, we've experienced another example of what can happen when we get too dangerously close to the flame of hateful ideology and extreme othering. Whether shutting out others as individuals or shutting out others as members of a group, when one's view narrows, one's focus can become stilted, and one's thoughts can have perilous consequences. When I began this path to ministry, I had one quote that I used to justify my calling over and over again. It was Jan Martel's Life of Pi's quote, and it reads, "The main battlefield for good is not the open ground of the public arena, but the small clearing of each heart." I would say that over and over again. I would believe that that was the true work of ministry. You've heard me say, I don't want us to be like-minded, but I want us to be like-hearted. But now I often worry about hearts that have been so hardened. I'm not sure how we're even going to get close to that small clearing. That's why I feel even more strongly now than ever that it doesn't really matter what the topic is. It just matters that we are here. A huge part of our collective spiritual practice is practicing and modeling what it means to connect, what it means to learn from each other, to listen intently to each other, to open our hearts and our minds and that small clearing and be willing to change and grow in ways we could never have expected or predicted. Now, with all that said, being open never means that we engage in ways that threaten ourselves or others. Being open doesn't mean that we engage in ways that demean ourselves or others. That we engage in ways that force us or others to be berated by hateful or dangerous rhetoric. That is not engagement for growth. That's engagement for control. It is engagement for diminishment. It is engagement for power over. And it is contrary to the values and principles that guide this shared faith. I have spent the last couple of days wondering about all of you. How what is happening in this country is impacting you. In any given week, I'm grateful to be able to have at least a little time hearing about how some of you are feeling. This week, I have heard about some fear. Fear can be an important part of our survival mechanisms, and it can also be paralyzing. But in these days, I also try to remember the words from another quote from Life of Pi. And it says, "I must say a word about fear. It is life's only true opponent. Only fear can defeat life. It is a clever, treacherous adversary, how well I know. It has no decency, respects no law, no convention, shows no mercy. It goes for your weakest spot, which it finds with unnerving ease. It begins in your mind always, so you must fight hard to express it. You must fight hard to shine the light of words upon it, because if you don't, if your fear becomes a wordless darkness that you avoid, perhaps even manage to forget, you open yourself to further attacks of fear because you have never truly fought the opponent who defeated you." There's been a lot of stoking of fear in the last week, and I have to admit there are some things for which I too am very afraid. But I also believe in our power of connection, our power of being weavers, our power of open-heartedness. If you are here or you are at home, or if you are watching this later on YouTube, you are not a solo practitioner, you are a weaver. A weaver. In fact, that is maybe a good image for the times that we are in. To go along with the movement of the moment I spoke about last week, how can we be weavers? I was driving past a bus bench in Fairfax this week on my way home, and there was an older woman and younger woman of color sitting next to each other. And I couldn't help but think, what if ICE pulled up in unmarked vehicles with masks on, with the Supreme Court's blessing, shoved them into their van, and poof, disappeared them from what is sure to be a life just waiting for them, thinking that they were going to get on the bus and go back to it. I wish that this was a far-fetched example, but these are the fears of our immigrant siblings, and they face them every single day. For so many of us who don't have to face that specific fear, there are and will continue to be real and vitally important opportunities for us to weave. Some will be slow weaving of a beautiful and diverse tapestry, but others may be driven by a rip that needs immediate attention and that none of us can weave alone. The need is too big, and we are all needed to connect these threads. These are hard and complicated times. There are no quick or easy answers to the challenges that we face. Distinguished professor and author Bell Hooks, in her book Teaching Community, A Pedagogy of Hope, said it this way: dominator culture has tried to keep us all afraid, to make us choose safety instead of risk, sameness instead of diversity. Moving through that fear, finding out what connects us, reveling in our differences. This is the process that brings us closer, that gives us a world of shared values and a meaning of community. Let us be weavers of this community and not let the events of the day, the week, or the month rip that precious, sacred fabric. May this not just be our practice in these fraught and difficult times, but together as sacred weavers, let this be our calling. May that be so, and blessed be. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this sermon from the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax. To listen to more sermon podcasts, go to uucf.org/sermons and scroll down to sermon podcasts.